Dear Greg, I'm writing to you from my home here in South Missouri. I need to divorce my pet rock. Now, my pet rock and I have been together for a while, but he's just not cutting it anymore. So, my question for you is this: as it is a rock and therefore an inanimate object, and I entered into this willingly against the state of Missouri's better sense, do I owe any sort of alimony to the rock, having been married to the rock now for over 10 years, in terms of Missouri? Or should I just stay married to the rock and just put up with it? Sincerely, Gladys.
It depends on the pet rock's behavior. Did the pet rock cheat on Gladys?
She sent some pictures that are kind of a little racy, but she doesn't explain what they mean.
The pet rock with other women, or
it's a lot of rocks. Like, you ever see those Zen stack rocks thing? Is that a rock?
I'm just wondering if the relationship was ever consummated. That was my question. Welcome to another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker on the September 7th, 2022. We've made it to the first week of September. I can't believe it. We've all survived. And our client for today is, I suddenly forgot what our client, yes, our client for today is Geeks, Nerds, and Dweebs. I'm having trouble.
Behold, trapped in a hellscape of their own invention, socially unaware old white men bound by the pretense of being fake lawyers yet knowing no law, no exquisite Latin terminology, they are inexplicably compelled to quibble over minutia, squabble over triflings, and bicker like those who value their backyards far too highly without even knowing the difference between an easement and an alleyway. At this very moment, you have entered the heart of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. Let's get started.
I'm a recent transplant to Portland, having escaped from the hellscape that is Florida. Just kidding, Florida. As a Florida refugee, I enjoy spotlighting many hip and trendy restaurants and bars in the area, and tonight's sponsor really gets you where it matters. The newest hotspot for the bougie brunch gang is Hot Crow Eating Cat Poop Cafe. These artisan scavengers bring together some of Portland's best street garbage and dumpster overflow. All the trash is locally sourced, mostly off of Interstate North Portland, and served generally warm, depending on local weather conditions, in fully recycled and reusable fast food bags. For a cool treat, stop by during the winter months for Hot Crow Eating Poop Cafe's assortment of seasonal roadkill popsicles. Did I mention all the kids and honored citizens get shiny objects just for stopping by? So join them at any of their roadside pop-up tents. Hot Crow Eating Cat Poop Cafe. Finally, something to crow about.
So shiny objects. Could you be a little more specific?
It depends. What's in stock.
Whatever they
found. How nice you were to them. Yeah. Whether you left French fries last time. Yeah.
So this is for crows too. It's almost like catering to crows. Crows like shiny objects. So crows might be
catered by crows. The crows are some of the scavengers.
You realize that Greg could never go there because of his general fear of crows, though, right?
Oh,
I don't like crows. They scare me.
Right.
They've attacked me before.
We have a section, for crowphobic people.
The name, though, needs a little work. I got to say, it's not very appetizing sounding.
It's not appetizing? Would you prefer some better kind of dumpster to get into, Greg?
No, just as long as the name's not. Was it eating cat poop? Did I hear correctly?
Yeah. Well, that's what the hot crow is eating, so you don't have to. I mean, that's part of it.
That should be the health code.
Anyway, our guest for today, we have a very, very special guest, is Stanley Livingston, who was Chip Douglas on the seminal sitcom My Three Sons, the second longest running live action sitcom on network television. I need to apologize to our guest, Stanley Livingston, for this.
That's all right. Sounds like some of Uncle Charlie's cooking.
Right.
Well, let's get right into it. So the fact is that you've had an entire life that you've had after leaving My Three Sons, and yet that is the stigma. I don't know if it's a stigma, if you consider it a stigma, but that's what hangs around your neck like your own personal albatross for your
legacy.
That's a better word.
Yeah.
Having been on a show that is beloved by so many, I could probably say millions of people. So what do you think is your biggest claim to fame outside of having done My Three Sons?
How the West Was Won.
What was your role in that? I saw the movie, but I saw that years ago.
Yeah, I was in the last third of the movie. I played George Papard and Carolyn Jones' son in that. Debbie Reynolds was my great aunt, and by then she was an old lady, came out to the Wild West from the East. Well, the whole movie, she was making her way across the United States and ended up, I think, in San Francisco and then finally wherever the heck we were. So that movie was kind of a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me career-wise because when I was a kid, I got into the movie industry thinking I was going to be, in Western movies and have a gun and a horse and live the life. Well, I never got into a Western. All my buddies did. And by the time I was, probably would have been working on a lot of different episodic TV, I got My Three Sons, which sort of precluded me from appearing on any other TV because of sponsorship. We had Chevrolet originally as the sponsor, and you couldn't do another TV show. They were usually sponsored by something else. So those were the rules back then, and we all signed contracts that we wouldn't do that. But 1963, a Western came along. My agent got a call. They were interested in seeing me, and I went in, met with the director, Henry Hathaway, and got hired to play the part of Prescott Rawlings, George Papard's son, in How the West Is Won. So the last third of the movie, I'm, throughout the whole thing and right up to the end, they're riding a buckboard into the sunset at the end.
Stanley, I wanted to say I grew up watching My Three Sons every day. I feel like I know you, Chip. Like you.
I know a lot of people have that. Yeah,
but I remember you had the worst haircut ever, and I gotta say, like as an older man, you're much handsomer than you'd ever think Chip would grow up to be.
Chip it depends what year you caught me. I mean, I was on the show all the way from the time I was 9 years old to 23. So. There was some pretty geeky phase, going where my hair became unruly. And we also had a maniacal assistant director who insisted on combing my hair kind of in this Adolf Hitler style. He'd wet a comb and run it through my hair. Yeah, it was bizarre. Yeah. Finally, I had to put a stop to that when I was about 15.
But I just want you to know that I think you blossomed. You were a little goony looking when you were a teenager. Well, I never would imagine you'd be such a handsome man. You're the silver fox. Look at you.
Well, towards the end of the
man.
Towards the end of the
show,
where are you
going with this, Greg?
I'm not hitting on him. I'm just saying.
It's like he's got some kind of a crush or something.
Well, he's way better looking than I would imagine.
We're going to go out to a dumpster after the show, right?
We'll go dumpster diving together. That'll be our first date.
Mm-hmm. I could call the Crows and have it delivered if you prefer. Just airdrop it.
That sounds like a musical group, the Crows. Maybe they can sing in the background for us.
So I grew up in New York, Stanley, and so I think this Channel 5 showed them. I can't remember which one, but I don't think they ever showed the Mike episodes, which I just was researching.
Well, they didn't for a while.
You had that lost brother, Mike, who just disappeared.
Well, yeah, he was on the show for the first 4 years, and then he did one episode the fifth year. And so from the fifth year of the show, literally for 7 more years, he wasn't in it. And when they started syndicating it in 1972, 12 years later, they only ran the color episodes. So that went for 15 more years. So the Mike episodes didn't start showing again until 1985.
Now, what caused that actor to be written out of the show? Was there like a dispute
caused it himself? No, well, a little bit of a dispute. He directed an episode in the 4th season for which he did a great job. I mean, he literally could have directed the show, but the way we shot in different episodes every day, sometimes 4 or 5 episodes. And they kind of bent the rule, and we put one whole show together so he could shoot it out, in other words, from start to finish. Then we went back to shooting, a couple scenes in this show, a couple scenes in that show. Sometimes we worked up to 5, 6 different shows per day. So you had to have the same director, and they didn't want Tim to be the director for the entire series. They wanted a more seasoned veteran to do that. And so when the 5th year came about, he said, yeah, I understand that, but this year, instead of directing 1, I want to direct 5. At least let me do that. And they said no. And he said, okay, then I'm out of here. And They paid him a good sum of money to come back for one episode to explain how he departed from the show. He got married to his girlfriend, and they moved off into the Twilight Zone, and we never heard from him again.
Wow. Did you maintain a relationship with him over the years?
I did, yeah. I was really close with him. Even though he was gone off the show, he wasn't out of my life. He'd come pick Barry, my brother Barry Livingston played Ernie and I up on the weekends occasionally, and you know, we'd go places, or he was always involved with cars, automobiles, auto events, racing. Or we go to his mom's house and go swimming there. She had a huge pool in Beverly Hills.
Wikipedia also mentioned that he liked race car driving, and
that's that. Yeah, well,
the producers were like, "You can't race car drive because we don't want to pay the insurance for your safety."
No, they had an edict for him: no race car driving during shooting season, which he wasn't real happy about, and but agreed to it. And yeah, after the show was over, he that's what he did. He would race cars. He was also a professional photographer, and lately he just passed away about a year ago. But for the probably 10 years preceding that, Tim and I and a bunch of other former child stars, we would go to the Indy 500 every year, and that was kind of fun. But like Tony Dow and I'm trying to think, Billy Gray, John Provost from Lassie, we all kind of hung out together at that. And Tim was also an author, and he wrote the quintessential book on racing at Le Mans. I think it's a 4-part series. And each book is, it's one of those huge cocktail table books, but it's over 300 pages. And it has all the stories behind every year of racing at Le Mans.
Was there like a child star club that you guys had like created or did? Because I would imagine that you'd want to like share stories or experiences in some way as you were like growing up in this environment.
And shared lawyers probably too.
There was probably something like that. I'm not a big guy for clubs or events. I figure any club that wanted to have me as a member, I probably wouldn't want to belong to. So yeah, they're a lot of these guys, when they grew up, I found out they all went to Hollywood professional school in lieu of going to public school like I did. And they were probably a little bit tighter. After my 3 sons ended, it seemed like we were sort of amenable about getting together and sharing war stories and horror stories. And by then, some of these former child stars, I didn't personally have that sort of experience, but apparently they had a rough go of it. When their shows ended, they no longer could find work, and some of them had a lot of either mental problems or drug problems. And that exacerbated that situation. I saw the writing on the wall when I was about 16, 17. I'm going, you know what, this acting thing, I've been doing it since I was 5 years old. I don't even know if I want to do this my whole life. I was more interested in production, and the last 4 or 5 years of the show, I tried to learn everything I could, about cameras, editing, lenses, production boards, how you schedule things. And I started a production company when I was 12 years old, and when I was 20 years old. And that
I was going to say, that's amazing. A production company at 12.
Well, I probably could have. I was pretty versed in shooting things and editing, and knew all the shots were needed to put something together. But to do it professionally, you got to be of a certain age. And I had a partner, and we go out there and shoot commercials, industrials, music videos, whatever came along. You just go shoot it and make some money, and you get better and better as you do it.
I was digging through your website, and I saw that you have a very strong artistic ability. You like make a lot of paintings and I don't know if you make portraits.
Yeah, I think if you went to my.
But how long did you do that right after leaving My 3 Thuns? You started getting into artwork, or when did that come along?
Okay, the artwork came along probably earlier in my life, probably when I was about 14. To be honest, I was always a drawer, painter my whole life, but I started to get, train myself in that primarily because I was on a set 10 hours a day, and there's not a hell of a lot you can do that is quiet. When I was about 16, I also had a guitar, and so I got banished off the set onto another sound stage that was soundproof.
Stanley,
throughout my whole life.
No drums, Stanley. No drums.
No drums at all. Well, the electric guitar was bad enough.
That's bad enough.
Right? Come over and say, "Hey, can you turn that? We can still hear you, even though this is soundproof." So, Yeah, between music and painting, I learned how to paint. I learned how to draw. Probably you name it, whether it's pen and ink, pencil, charcoal, acrylic, oil, watercolor. I did it. And I amassed, from the time I was probably about 15 to about 30. I don't know how many paintings I did, but I always took a picture of them because I'd give them away, or I actually occasionally, when I got to be older, I had people buy them. So they had the original, but I had a good high-res quality picture of whatever I did. And the website I have, it's kind of similar to the one that's my fan site. My fan site, StanleyLivingston.com. But if you add the word art, StanleyLivingstonArt.com, that takes you to what I call my fine art gallery. And a lot of those paintings are the ones that I did over the years. And, people order them and, they get a signed, numbered, limited edition.
Yeah, some of them are quite stunning. I was very appreciative of a lot of
Stanley, I was also interested in how I never knew William Frawley was on the early years of the show. Could you tell us about William Frawley?
Well, you're too young to know that.
I only saw the
Well, I knew he was on, but he's not that much younger than me.
Well, no, but again, if you were, young enough to watch My Two Sons, say in 1960, Bill Frawley, you only saw him for the first 4 years because he passed away. And then again, they never ran those. They never ran them. Like, we just kept going from season 5 to season 12. It went on daytime syndication for about 15 years, but they would only show the color shows. William Frawley was only in the black and whites. And it literally wasn't until Nickelodeon or Nick at Night came along in 1985 that they decided to take these old black and white episodes and start showing them again. And then people realized, oh my God, Bill Frawley was on the show. I did not know.
What was he like? Do you have any stories about him?
Oh, yeah. No, he was a great guy, and pretty much like you saw him on My Two Sons, except on the show, there was no 4-letter words. There was plenty of 4-letter words to fill, when you're working with him. Back when the camera wasn't rolling, it was a lot of 4-letter words. He was pretty profane, but absolutely hysterical, and the stories he would tell. And he's just kind of a goofy, curmudgeonly old guy, But yeah, we took a shine to each other. I didn't know either of my grandfathers when I grew up, and I kind of set out, made a mission for him to become my surrogate grandfather. And I did, and yeah, we hung out a lot, especially on the set. I'd go back to his, dressing room and play cards. He wasn't exactly into rules and regulations, so occasionally he'd start smoking a cigar and light one up for me. Or we go to lunch and he'd always order a drink from me. I'm only like 12, and I had a guardian there, and I'd look over when my drink came and she'd be like that to me, don't you dare. And yeah, Bill and I, we went to ball games, a rare occasion I went over to his apartment, just hung out. But yeah, he was a nice guy. When I think I was about 14, I was into surfing. And I think it was my 14th birthday, I came back to the dressing room after lunch and opened the door to the dressing room, and there was a 9-foot-long Dewey Weber surfboard there from Uncle Bill. So he made my day, and yeah, and then immediately, about a couple months later, I don't know why the studio didn't catch that immediately. For me, surfing got banned, so yeah, that surfboard ended up in our swimming pool till it hit the nose of it hit the side of the pool too many times.
So Tim wasn't allowed to do race car driving, and you weren't allowed to surf?
It really got to be ridiculous at one point. I couldn't surf, and I can understand it. We actually had a guy that was the assistant cameraman that was into surfing, and he and I were kind of the two cool guys that had surfer gear when we weren't working. He went surfing, got his 2 front teeth knocked out.
Oh.
And after that, they banned me from doing. They didn't ban him because he didn't have to appear on camera. But
he was behind the camera. Who cares?
Right. Who cares if you have teeth or not? But yeah, they ended up banning baseball because we play baseball on the street in between our soundstage. Because I hit a baseball and I went right through Gary Morton's window. Gary Morton was Lucille Ball's husband, who was running the studio. So, yeah, so that didn't work out too well. What else?
That's a whole episode right there. The time that Stanley broke the studio guy's car window.
Yeah, the head of the studio.
The mean old man broke back.
We'd ride bikes. We all had bikes on the set, not only us, but the crew guys too. But the actors, sometimes we get into these things where you play tag on a bike, where you would ram the other guy's bike from behind or from the back from behind and try and knock it out from underneath them. And somebody got hurt, so bicycles got banned. Then we got skateboards, and that lasted about 6 months. We used to skateboard with the 2 kids that were on the Lucy show, which was right next door to us, with Lucille Ball, Vivian Vance, and the 2 kids were Ralph Hart and Jimmy Garrett. So they were our age. So, but I can't remember.
So this has been a later Lucy show than when William Frawley was
yeah,
on.
well, yeah. Frawley was on I Love Lucy, and then later in the early 60s, she came back with the Lucy show, which was
where she worked at that department store with that weird boss.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I think it was Ralph Hart. There was a studio that had a ramp going up to it. Somebody went down it, fell, and broke their leg. So needless to say, skateboards were banished also.
You couldn't do anything. It sounds like a curse being a TV star.
It was. In fact, we have a very funny picture. I should put it up on the internet at some point, because we were trying to make a point. We waited. We knew the boss was coming down. And it just happened that Fred McMurray was looking at what we were doing, and we were waiting, for the producer to come over. So we were sitting there, and it's Barry, myself, and Fred McMurray sitting there knitting socks.
Because that's all you're allowed to do.
That was about all we're allowed to do.
Now you bring in Fred McMurray. Now Fred McMurray is a Hollywood legend, even before My Three Sons.
Yeah.
And I mean, being in that company of him and William Frawley and William Demarest later on as well, and all the various different guest stars who must have come through. What was that like? Were you ever starstruck by anybody who came on the set, or was there somebody who, when they were on, you never expected them to become a huge star that they later became? Because I know that Jodie Foster and Harrison Ford kind of came through the doors of My Three Sons in some way. And...
Yeah. If you check on that website, I actually put together what I call a special guest list. And it was all the people who were previously big movie stars: Gloria Swanson, Sylvia Sidney, Lou Ayres. I mean, just, Andy Devine, tons of people. And, their careers were kind of, starting to fade a little bit. They still wanted to work. So, most of those people would have never done TV. It was because Fred McMurray was the star of it that it made it okay for them to come on. They wanted to work with Fred, and the show was highly rated, so they did. And on the other side of the coin, there were people that were just starting out their careers who were yet to become something. I think you mentioned Jodie Foster. I think Harrison Ford was just an extra. I'm not even sure he was credited, but he's fully visible in one of the episodes. But Beau Bridges, Sally Kellerman, Martin Sheen. There's another one that probably my favorite out of all the people that ended up having a pretty big career. On the show, Fred McMurray's character was an aeronautical engineer, and a lot of the episodes had scenes of him at work, and they'd always have an establishing shot of looked like an aeronautical factory, and then it would cut inside to the offices, and he'd be at his drafting board, designing some airplane. And anyway, there was an episode where there was a flashback, and Fred was remembering when he had this boss, I think, that was yelling at him. And, just on his case. And when they did the flashback scene, the guy who was supposed to be Fred when he was, in his 20s is Tom Skerritt.
So Tom Skerritt was Fred McMurray as a youth?
Well, not as a youth, but as a young man, a young aeronautical engineer. Yeah.
Wow. I heard that Fred McMurray had so much clout that he would some seasons just record all of his scenes.
No, it wasn't quite that. No, it wasn't quite like that. What it was, his contract was that he would work for about 3 months straight. And when he worked, he really did work. He was in every single shot, meaning sometimes we would shoot a scene and we'd shoot the master and his close-up, and then we'd move on. And we'd come back to get our close-up sometimes 3 months, 4 months later. And so that went on for 3 months. He would leave for the summer and spend 3 months with his family and come back at the end for 2 months, and whatever shows they hadn't shot with him, they'd start shooting those, or scenes that we were working on that he would come in through the front door and say, "Hi boys, I'm home." We'd pick him up with him walking through the door. So yeah, the whole thing was designed around him to allow him to go home at, no later than 5 or 6 o'clock at night. He had adopted twins, and, he just didn't want to see his kids not grow up to go do a movie. And sometimes you're in another state or another country for, could be 3 months, could be 6 months. So doing that, by the time you get home, your kids are in college. So
you'd have to do acting scenes where you weren't even reacting to it, or just be like, look over here.
Yeah. Well, exactly. We had the script supervisor. They had an apple box for her to stand on, so we'd get the eye line correctly. And she'd stand on that, so she looked like she was about 6'4", and we would do our lines with her. And later when Fred came back, they'd shoot his half of it, and cut it together, and nobody knew the difference.
So she was like a human. She was a human green screen, is what she was.
She was. Well, yeah. Sometimes when she wasn't around, they would just hold a mop up and say, "That's your eye line. Look at the head of the mop." So
you actually very
good.
I love it.
Wasn't the mop actually the mother on My Three Sons?
Well, that was actually Cousin It before he got a job on the Addams Family.
He also came through Cousin It. That's interesting.
Yeah, he came through as the line reader.
Uncle Charlie was the surrogate mother. They even make jokes about it. I remember the jokes about it. He was so weird. I was just like, I'm the mom.
Well, William Frawley was the surrogate mother before Uncle Charlie too, though.
Yeah, well, that's how the very first episode, the pilot episode, literally starts that way. It's how they introduce this character. A guy rings the doorbell, and it's obviously a Fuller Brush man, and Bill Frawley answers the door. Can I help you? And he's like, well, I'm here selling. He goes, where's the lady of the house? And he starts laughing, going, I'm the closest thing to a lady around here. So he said, so. Yeah.
I have a weird connection to William Frawley. It's not a major connection. It's very, very tenuous. But the fact is that he died 2 days before I was born.
Oh, wow.
And the other weird coincidence is that he also died on the same day as Tim Considine did. They both died on March 3rd. Although
I'd heard that recently. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, it was a big shock when he went, even though we kind of knew he was going. I was just, probably 14 years old, so it kind of really hit me hard. And then Bill Demers came on the show, and I kind of resented him at first. You took my buddy's job, and then. I kind of warmed up to him after a while, but at first it was, I don't know. It took a while.
Did you develop a grandfatherly or grandson-like relationship with him over the years?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he was a nice guy. It's just, when you're young and you're a teenager and you have friends, you don't want somebody taking their place.
Yeah.
The show had to go on, so they had to get somebody. Yeah, well, they had another guy in there. I forget that guy's name. He was on Barney Miller. And
was it Curly Joe from My
No, it was.
Was it Abe Vigoda?
I can't think of the guy's name. No. I wish I could remember the guy's name, but he came in for a couple episodes, and he was really good too. But a different kind of guy. But he was real surly like that. Everything came out of his mouth, and they were just waiting for Bill Demers to finish something he was working on. And then he finally, came and stepped up to the plate and stayed there for the other, whatever it was, 8 years. So
now moving out of My Three Sons, you were in a movie that was the first movie directed by Paul Bartel. And I know that Greg has followed that guy's career. It was called Private Parts, I think was what it was called.
Yeah. It was called Private Parts, much to my dismay. I was like, I remember when I got the script and my agent said to me, he said, the director wants to meet you. Why don't you take a look at the script? And, he wants you to come over to his house tomorrow and go out to dinner with him. They want you for this part. And I'm like, what? What is this? Like, is it a porno movie? He's like, oh, no, it's a horror film, kind of. It actually, after I read it, I was like, well, wow, this kind of like a Hitchcock film, really. And the way it was shot and the way it came out, it actually was like a Hitchcock film. And once I got to know Paul, I think Paul envisioned himself as Alfred Hitchcock kind of guy. It was a little bit weird. But anyway, when I went over, he said, well, we're probably not going to be calling it Private Parts. And I was like, oh, thank God for that. And he says, I think we're thinking about using Vital Parts. I go, well, that's worse. And anyway, I found out that the original script was called Blood Relations, and I thought that was the best of the three titles, but for whatever reason, they didn't want to go back to that. That became Private Parts, and I said, well, I don't know. I said, the problem is going to be not making the movie, but you want to get it in theaters. how's that going to go with the advertising with a name like that? You're going to end up in the porno section of the paper, because back in those days, newspapers had two different sections. One was black ink, and if you had a porno film, they would gray it out, and you'd be on that page. And sure enough, because of that title, they put private parts into that grayed area, and it kind of hurt the.
Is that a worse title than Smokey and the Hotwire Gang, though?
Well, Smokey and the Hotwire Gang was, again, not called Smokey and the Hotwire Gang when I got involved. It was called Hotwire, which I thought was a cool title, because that's what it was. These guys hotwire and steal cars. And then the producer had this brilliant idea at the end, and he said, well, there's all these Smokey movies out, the ones with the CB radios, and Smokey and the Bandit. And then there was also gang movies out then, The Warriors, Boulevard Nights, and I can't even think of all of them, but there were quite a few. So he got the brilliant idea of combining the best of that, calling it Smokey and the Hotwire Gang. Which, I mean, not that the movie didn't deserve to be condemned there, but it actually ended up playing, I think, strictly as a double bill in drive-in theaters, which was kind of cool back then. I was okay with that because, most of those CB movies, that's where they play it anyway. So I kind of looked at that as like a badge of honor that I had a movie that was destined.
I want to get back to the part where they I want to get back to the part where they advertised pornography in the newspaper.
They did. I remember this. I remember this.
Yeah.
In New York, they did.
Deep Throat and Behind the Green Door. There was a bunch of movies. There was ones that were kind of more lascivious titles, I guess you would say. Huh. But it was mainly to tell you which theater was playing in and the start time. But how you could distinguish it was printed in, it's like a gray ink. It wasn't full black. So you would, you didn't want to go see Behind the Green Door and think, oh, wow, I'm going to see the new Julie Andrews movie in it.
So then
bring the kids.
Private Parts was
Maryland Chambers or something.
Right. Really bad name then, for sure.
It was. I was surprised they didn't have the business savvy to see that because, at that point, well, I mean, I guess I was getting my feet wet as a producer and director then. And that name just seemed like a bad choice to me if you wanted to get in the theaters. And the ridiculous part of it was actually, I think, a pretty good movie. It was really stylishly shot. In fact, the guy who was the DP on it, John Davis, he went on to become like a huge director, directing a lot of that Steven Seagal action movies and a Kevin Costner film. I mean, he went on, he just went on to become a huge director. So the movie looked incredible. And the only thing it had that was kind of strange for the times, but, it was a little ahead of its time, that movies that had any kind of explicit gore in them, before that, there was always a cutaway when it would happen, like somebody gonna lop your head off as soon as the knife would hit. They'd cut to a subway with a screaming fire engine going by or something like that. So this movie actually showed a beheading in the beginning. Some girls walking down the hall, and then the bad guy or bad person steps out of the shadows and whack, a machete swings around. You see this head rolling down the hallway. Well, I never saw anything like that in a movie back then. This is like 1974. So yeah, that was quite shocking. In fact, I remember I brought my whole family to see it, including a couple 4-year-old kids.
Guess what, kids?
I T-ball sunk into the seat, and didn't realize how they were going to shoot the end stuff too. Or that's kind of where the kinky, weird part of the movie comes out. But
if you don't mind me getting back
was
to
like a whodunit.
If you don't mind me getting back to My Three Sons, I was always curious because even as a kid, I realized Ernie was your real life brother. I remember seeing the credits. What was that like working with your brother? Did you guys fight a lot?
Well, I didn't know it was my brother till he showed up on the set. No, it wasn't weird. We actually had worked together twice before that. Barry and I did a film in 1957 with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward called Rally Around the Flag Boys, and we played his sons. And I went on the interview and auditioned, and they told me to wait in the outer office, and I did. And my mom was there, and my little brother Barry, because she didn't have a babysitter. And the casting person came out and said, "You've got the part." And then they went, "Oh, who is this little kid here?" And my mom said, well, that's Stan's brother, Barry. And they go, well, we're looking for another little kid. He'd be perfect. Does he act? And my mom went, yeah. And so they hired him. Well, the first day we started shooting, we were supposed to be watching a TV set when Paul Newman comes through the door behind us, walks up to us and, hey, boys, how you doing, everything? And our directorial task was just to completely ignore him, just stare at the TV set like he isn't there, don't acknowledge him at all. So we shot it once or twice. The director came up to my brother and said, hey, you're not looking at the TV set. I need you to look right at that TV set and nowhere else. So we did it again and came back up to my brother. Anyway, about 2 or 3 times of that, they sent during the lunch break, sent my brother to an ophthalmologist. Turned out my brother had a crossed eye. So it was never going to look like he was looking at the TV set. And by 1 o'clock, they had fired him and I had a brand new brother. And,
so he was kicked out of the house. That kid replaced his brother at home too.
Right.
A lawsuit.
Basically, my mom and my parents said, we got to get a new little kid. This one's not going to make it in showbiz. Well, it turned out to be a blessing because almost all the little kids back then kind of looked like me. I had blonde hair, cute little kids. My brother looked, he looked kind of a little bit goofy. He had, kind of a Mr. Moto haircut, buck teeth. And once he got the glasses, it kind of solidified his career. And he went from, working, but actually working a lot because he looked like a little Einstein or something. And he'd get all these parts where, he'd have tons of dialogue. And Barry was a good actor. We actually worked together again before My Two Sons. How I became an actor was I got hired as an extra on Ozzie and Harriet. And in the course of shooting the episode, I was hired to be an extra. And Ozzie came up to me and asked me if I could say this line. And he said, look, when you get right here, I'm going to put a piece of tape on the floor. Just pause there, look right at me, say this line, then turn and go as soon as you're done. So we rehearsed it a couple times. I did it. And he moved the camera in closer. I got a close up. And, he went up to my mom at the end of the day and said, leave your, contact information with my secretary in the front office. I want to have Stanley back. So that was music to my mom's ear. And anyway, so from about 1957 till 1960, when I started My Three Sons, I was doing, 3 or 4 episodes of Ozzie and Harriet every year as a neighborhood kid. And the very last one I did, they were aware of Barry because, again, he'd come down the set because my mom didn't have a babysitter occasionally. So they knew he was there and found a little part for him. And they actually called him my brother on Ozzie and Harriet. He had a scene where Ozzie's he ordered T-shirts. They come back misprinted. So he's trying to pawn them off on all these kids and gives us some. And, we're not interested, but we're sitting at his table eating ice cream. Anyway, one of the kids eating the ice cream, and he had a couple lines, was Barry. And when I left the show, a couple shows later, because I couldn't do Ozzie and Harriet anymore because of My Two Sons, they continued to have Barry on as like the regular neighborhood kid. So he kind of picked up where I left off. And for the next 3-4 years, he did 3 or 4 Ozzie and Harriets per year. And then he started working as Ernie, the friend on the show. And then finally Ernie gets adopted by the Douglas family and becomes a brother.
I have a question about that. So how was it that he was able to get adopted if he was your friend on the show? Like, did something happen to his parents?
He moved to the Orient or something. I think I read this in Wikipedia.
No, it doesn't work like that. That's called nepotism.
But I mean, in the storyline, My Three Sons, how did they explain how you suddenly became your adopted brother?
Yeah, no, they explained it very well, I thought. You never heard mention of it before. You never saw his parents before. He would just always hang out at our house. And frankly, I was kind of like, I thought that was strange too, because we were in class together. He was like, a school chum, and he'd be in the same classroom as me. Well, they never mentioned that he was like 3 years younger and about 2 heads shorter than me. So either he was very smart or I was very stupid. I don't know which one. But how they explained it was the year when Tim left, they had to come up with a son in a hurry because the show was called My Three Sons, and we were now down to 2 sons. That he was a foster kid, and his parents were going to move out of the country, and they weren't allowed to take a foster child with them out of the country. So they had to put him back up for either fostering again or adoption by somebody else. And the Douglas family steps up to the plate when they find out what's going on. And, there was about 4 or 5 episodes written around that whole scenario of Ernie being, a foster child. And going to be in a bad situation, and we all decided to adopt them. They had a social worker, which was Vera Miles, by the way, and and she still looked good, so there was kind of this little added love interest thing going on with Fred MacMurray and Vera Miles, and then finally by the end of the 5th episode, we adopted him. The judge, we had a scene in the courtroom where the judge says, "These are your new parents," and come home, and Barry makes everybody cry. He goes, "Mr. Douglas, is it okay if I just call you Dad?" And Steve, of course, says, "Yes, sir. And you could just call me Dad."
Yeah, I believe
just
that
made Greg cry.
They say in the description of that episode, I actually just read that, where the judge was like, normally if there's not a mother figure, we don't do this, but Uncle Charlie proved that he's a mother figure, and they're like, basically, you're the mom once again.
Yeah, well, that was what My 3 Cents was really all about. I mean, it was kind of an anomaly for that era. I mean, if you watch the shows that preceded it, Father Knows Best, Donna Reed show, they were all the nuclear family, the mom, the dad, 2 sisters and a brother, or 2 brothers and a sister, and that's what they consisted of. My 3 Cents was very unorthodox and maybe a little ahead of its time, to present a family that didn't have that. And, it was kind of, the pathos was there, and then just the heart tug that there wasn't a woman involved in the upbringing of these kids. But they brought the grandfather in, who kind of picked up the slack with those chores. Originally, My 3 Cents wasn't even going to be My 3 Cents. It was going to be My 3 Daughters. Oh. That's how the producer was going to sell that, Don Feddersen. And the show was really written, I'm sure you guys didn't watch that, and I didn't like the show either, but my parents said it was called The Lawrence Welk Show.
Oh, yes.
It's a show completely hated by all little kids from that era.
Well, we once had a guest on our show whose father was one of the horn players on The Lawrence Welk Show.
Yeah, the horn players are Bobby Burgess from the Mouseketeers, and I forgot who the female dancer were, but they were the main dancers on the show. But anyway, the McGuire sisters were on that show. There were 3 of them, and he wrote the pilot episode for them. And so it was going to be called My 3 Daughters. And instead of Steve Douglas, I don't remember what the character's name was, but it was to be played by Eddie Albert.
Oh.
Yeah. And McGuire sisters didn't want to leave Lawrence Welk, and they ended up having to revamp the whole show. And it came to Don Feddersen's attention somehow that Fred MacMurray was open to possibly doing a TV project if we could work out the details. And getting Fred MacMurray to do a show would be like getting, right now, Tom Cruise to do a TV show playing the dad. Back then it was huge to get a movie star of that caliber, to do a TV show and do the daily grind of a TV series.
What was he like in person, Fred MacMurray? He had such a kind face. Was he as nice as he seemed?
Yeah. The kindest guy I ever met, very low key. And 12 years of working with Fred, and we had our fair share of problems that we had to, fix on the set. I never saw him blow a gasket. I never saw him scream. I never saw him have a, meltdown. He was just a very soft-spoken, congenial guy that, a hard-working guy. And he was, he was really just like your average Joe that happened to become a major movie star. Because in 1959, when this all kind of got created, he was at the top of his profession. He was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood at that time. He had just come off of the Caine Mutiny. He just did The Apartment. He just did The Shaggy Dog. He just did The Absent-Minded Professor. And then segued into this TV show.
Wow.
And that opened the door for a lot of actors who would have never considered, doing a TV show. Later, my boss got Henry Fonda to do the Smith Family, and, a few other guys, Brian Keith did Family Affair, John Forsythe did To Rome with Love.
Was it confusing for you? Did you feel like you had 2 dads?
No. By the time My 3 Cents had rolled along, I'd probably done about 6-7 movies. I'd probably done about 25 TV shows. So I knew the ropes, even though I was 9 or 10, I was savvy as to what the business was all about. I wasn't delusioned by. The other thing too is, the schooling for us, that was the only thing that was different for me. And I credit my parents for that. And, I credit that for me not being as messed up as I probably could have been. But most of the kids who were on TV shows went through a private school called Hollywood Professional School, and they would go there 3 hours a day to get their education. But the problem with it, and I think that's what my parents saw, was that you're just hanging out with other of your own ilk, child actors, and already you're being treated special because you're only going to 3 hours of school a day. My parents put us in public school, and although it was living hell, it's, at the beginning of the year, every year we'd have to go back in February to public school, from February, March, April, usually about 3 months. But, you're in with just regular kids who are just totally astounded seeing, like a TV star at their school. You have to remember back then when we were doing My Three Sons and I'd go back to school, if you were a top rated show like we were, you had 60 million people a week watching you. Because there was only 3 networks, it was ABC, CBS, NBC. So I couldn't go anywhere when I was a kid without, people surrounding me. It was probably just a small dose of what the Beatles got, but it was just, it was crazy. So when I'd go back to public school, I either had people that loved me or I'd be in fights all the time because they didn't. They were jealous, and I had to save the honor of My Three Sons. So
did the people at the show prevent you from getting in fights at the school because you might get a black eye?
Well, you
fighting at school was canceled.
Once I was in public school, I was on my own, man. Nobody came to my defense.
I want to get out of that. I want to get out of the My Three Sons realm because I have a question about a project you just did this past year, which is Antiquities, the Star Wars Galactic Cruiser story. So
I had nothing to do with the production. Yeah, there's some guys. How I met them is I produced a Cinerama film back in 2012, an actual 3-strip, 35 millimeter, 3-camera film called In the Picture. And we made it to showcase there was a Cinerama Film Festival coming up at the ArcLight that year. So the guy that approached me with it, they were in the process of trying to restore a Cinerama camera. And it was to be the first Cinerama production in 50 years. Well, it also turned out I was in the last Cinerama production 50 years ago, which was How the West Was Won. So I kind of had a little bridge there. And I was also in it. Yeah, so there was some guys that approached us just before we started shooting and said, "Hey, would you guys mind if we did a documentary about you guys making a Cinerama film?" I would, it sounds incredible. So they were there the whole time. They did this incredible documentary called The Last Days of Cinerama, and it showed the whole process about how we worked with this camera that's about the size of an old-time phone booth. I mean, it's ridiculous. The batteries alone were like 300 pounds just to run the thing. And so it was great. So years later, we stayed in contact, but they contacted me, I think it was February and March, and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing. And, we're just wondering if you would do an acting part in it." And I said, "Well, I really don't do acting anymore. I don't look for it or anything." He said, "But you'd be really right." So could we just send you the script? And I went, "All right, yeah." So send me the script and maybe. And so I looked at it and I thought, well, you know what? Those guys were so cool. They did such a good job. I thought I should do it in either case. So I called them back and said yes. And then as soon as I hung up, I turned to my wife and I said, "Oh, I don't know what I just did. I just agreed to be an actor in a film. How the hell am I going to remember all these lines? There's like 8 pages of dialogue here." And, I'm like, oh my God. So fortunately, it was about 2 months off. So I had ample time to quell my fears about not being able to remember. I don't remember what I did yesterday.
It's a Star Wars project. You're gonna get royalties for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I wish.
People are gonna watch that forever.
Yeah, but this isn't like a high production value Star Wars.
I know, but it's Star Wars. No. That's all that matters.
Yeah, they've got some effects in it, but it definitely isn't a George Lucas production. It's not the what they were doing with the Star Wars films, that's for sure. But
yeah, it was
somehow they were able to get permission to do it. And
I watched I think the first 5-minute episode that they had, and it was interesting seeing a lot of it taking place on somebody's cell phone was one of the major props. I'm like, okay, this could be an interesting production. I haven't watched the rest of it yet, but I just wanted to kind of get into that and go, how did that happen? So
yeah, they approached me, and like I said, the last one, the one that I'm in, basically a crusty old drifter, and the guy stumbles across me, and I try to cheat him out of some money. He ends up cheating me, and at the end, I don't take it too well and get up and well, I don't want to give a spoiler alert of what he does to me, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm as cranky as Uncle Charlie in this, so just that part I'll give you.
You learned.
Yeah,
I
training.
learned. I
Cranky
learned from
training.
the best. Right.
Curmudgeonliness.
Yeah.
So are you retired now from all of showbiz, or is there
No,
something
not
new in
at
your
all.
future?
Well, until COVID came along 2 years ago, I had 2 TV pilots ready to go. One had the funding, and I couldn't figure out how to shoot it without running afoul of certain Screen Actors Guild policies in relation to COVID. And I couldn't figure out there was no COVID insurance. And I was freaked out about, what would happen, because not only was I the producer and director, but I was also the manager of the LLC, which holds the company. And the liability all lied with me. So it was like, gosh, if something goes wrong or somebody gets sick and there's a problem, guess who they're going to sue? Or if somebody, gets sick and passes away from COVID, because that was pretty prevalent back then, I'd be up the creek without a paddle because you're going to get sued. And we were pretty much doing what Screen Actors Guild was saying not to do at that time. So I gave the project to my 2 partners and said, here, if you guys can keep the money guy on board with you, go ahead, take me off. I'm going to take myself off this LLC and off the production. I don't want to see my name on a scrap of paper, and good luck to you. And my other project, we were just taking meetings with people about getting it funded. It was more of a traditional sitcom, where the first one was a talk show. And I started thinking about it. I go, I'm going to have the same problem here. If I luck out and get a backer, I'm going to have to say to them, we may not be able to shoot this for 3 to 6 months. Well, here it is, not 3 to 6 months. It's like a year and a half later. And I just didn't think that was fair to do. So basically hung it up, told my brokers to, move on and do something else or work on somebody else's project, and I'll get back to you when I'm ready. So I'm hoping after the beginning of the year, that's far enough out that most of this liability issues could be resolved, and see how prevalent COVID is at that point. And at that point, I've got a great little sitcom, and I'll push on with that one.
Oh, it sounds like you've definitely got your work still ahead of you. Maybe your best work still ahead of you.
Yeah.
So one final my 3 sons question, because we've already gone like a half an hour over where we would normally like get into our cooking segment. So is there anybody that you were shocked to find out was starstruck about you during the course of your life, or like some star where you went gaga about who you were?
How about not a star? How about somebody bigger than a star? Seriously.
So you have the Pope?
Almost. How about a president of the United States?
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Which one?
Eisenhower?
Richard Nixon.
Nixon?
Richard Nixon. Yeah. Back in, believe this or not, in the early 70s, I was a Republican, and I got involved in some stuff right before the re-election. And I got invited to all kinds of functions that he was at. Met him at the White House, was introduced to him, and and I could see his eyes just kind of lit up when he met me, and I'm thinking, God, that's weird, But anyway, he was just a really friendly guy. Turned out, he knew a lot about my 3 sons. I'd golfed with Fred McMurray before. But I was getting invited like almost, I would say about every 2-3 months to a function at the White House or the Western White House or other things, events that he went to. And it sort of became embarrassing because, you're talking about a room where it was like Clint Eastwood, George Hamilton, Charlton Heston. And meanwhile, he'd see me and make a beeline for me.
That's got to be surreal that Richard Nixon's coming after you. Did you ever get to put a name of your own on his enemies list?
No, but I have a lot of memorabilia here from celebrities for the president. Well, I got out of that pretty early, too, when the Watergate stuff went down. That's it for me. But he was just a genuinely in-person, nice, friendly guy. And like I said, I'd go to parties and he'd see me and make a beeline for me. And put his arm around my shoulder, and we'd go walking up, talking about my 2 cents. And he must have watched the episodes because he could clearly talk about the episodes, which I thought, wow, maybe he's not really presidential.
He was like, "What's up with Mike?"
He's like watching TV all day. Right. I know. And the funniest part is when he peeled me out. I remember I turned around to my wife then, a different wife, but I turn around and I go like that, it's like, and then I look and I see, people like Clint Eastwood go, who the hell's that little guy? Why is the president taking him aside, talking to him? We'd be over there for like 10, 15 minutes, talking about the show with Brett McMurray. And it was, it was flattering, but it was also just, I thought, surrealistic. I mean, how I got involved in the political thing was surrealistic enough, because I was not really a Republican or a Democrat. My family was Democrat. I was taking a college course and a political science class. And part of it was that if you were a Republican, you had to work for the Democrats. There was like local elections going on, or vice versa. If you're Republican or Democrat, you'd work for the Republican. So somehow I ended up at the Republican office, and some guy there recognized me and came up to me, introduced himself, and he said, "So would you be interested in being part of this thing we're creating called Celebrities for the President?" I go, "No, I'm really apolitical. I don't want to be involved." And so I kind of declined it. But, I left my contact information with this guy. I still remember his name. It was Alan Hoffenblum. I think he was the head of the 38th district in LA. So about a month or 2 months later, I got a call, and on the phone that goes, "We have a call from you from Governor Reagan." And I'm like, "You must have a wrong number." And I hung up. I was like, "What? Somebody just called." I go, "It's probably a friend of mine pulling a prank." So immediately the phone rang again, and they said, "Excuse me, this is a call from Governor Reagan's office. Please do not hang up. Governor Reagan would like to speak to you." And I'm like, "Are you And they go, "Well,
you can say that
Stanley
word
Livingston,
actually on our show. It's totally
okay." Yeah, it was pretty weird. So he gets on the phone, and cordial guy, and so he said, "Listen, you can do whatever you want. We're actually would like to ask you to do something totally nonpartisan." They mentioned to me that you're sort of nonpartisan, and here's what I'm proposing. He goes, "This is the first year that 18-year-olds are going to have the right to vote, and we want to get somebody your age that people are familiar with, that looks young, that could go to high schools. And a lot of the times you'll be going with me and give a speech about why you need to exercise your right to vote come, end of 72. And they said it would be totally non-political, and you can just, talk about America and, how great it is, and you have to exercise your right to vote." So, yeah, I said, well, I guess I could do that. So for about 4 or 5 months, I did. I flew around the country with Ronald Reagan, and we go to high schools and go in, and I'd give my speech, and he'd give his, and he was hysterical. I mean, a funny guy. And so I got to know him pretty well.
Republicans wanted people to vote. They were encouraging people to vote.
Instead of young people to vote back then, instead of going off and, sticking daisies down the muzzle of like guns and stuff like that. This is the hippie era. But anyway, through that, I got sort of sucked in. I got another call, and that's how that Celebrities for the President thing began, from some attorney. And I decided, I think I'm going to do this. I'm meeting interesting people. It was fun. And as long as nobody's telling me how to vote, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. It was a very exciting year. And, I had no idea Richard Nixon watched TV, or his daughters, Trisha and Julie, they were big fans. And yeah, it just was an eye opener. Just going to those parties was an eye opener in itself.
That's
of all these stuffed shirts, Republicans, and, they're all in black suits and, and black tuxedos, and they're in black. And I didn't know. I showed up in a white tuxedo. My wife was wearing all white with a red bow tie. They're like
you were at prom.
Right. Yeah, I was like Harry Styles before Harry Styles or something.
Very nice.
Well, this does bring us to far past our halfway point where we
sorry about that, guys. Yeah,
no, it's totally fine. We would normally I would just cut you off, but it was really interesting talking to you.
That, it's just been about you.
Well, hey,
instead of our normal stupidity, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I like abnormal stupidity. That works too.
Well, stick around for a couple minutes. We've got some stupid stuff coming our way, actually.
All right.
It gets nuttier.
It does. It gets
All
a little
right.
ridiculous. So we're going to
Rose
begin
in
with
Coke,
our
just the
cooking
beginning.
segment, actually. So it's
Is Uncle Charlie's
it's-
chili or something?
yeah, it's rarely something edible, though, I have to say. So we'll give this a shot.
At Safe Mart, it's a Safe Mart. Come to Safe Mart and be safe.
Safe Mart is a proud sponsor of Food is for Eating with Waspy Soda Pop. Today's special, homemade margarine casserole for only $17.23. Come get some at Safe Mart. Be safe.
Food is for eating. Food is for eating. Food is for eating with Waspy Soda Pop.
Hey there, everybody. This is Waspy Soda Pop with another episode of Food is for Eating. I got a great one for you today. It's going to go fast and quick, so you need to make sure you take really good, careful notes. This is a great cocktail for you to make. For those of you who don't drink alcohol, well, too bad. You're going to have to figure this one out, or just go get off that wagon and enjoy some life, you know. AA's not for everybody. So, besides that point, this is a good drink because we're coming into fall, and it kind of mixes both summer and fall in a great spongy little thing. I don't know if spongy is the right word, but I like saying it. Anyway, this is a grasshopper cocktail. Here are your ingredients. First, you want to get 3/4 of fluid ounces of creme de menthe, 3/4 fluid ounces of white creme de cacao. I think that I'm pronouncing that right. It's not cocoa. Then 1/4 fluid ounce of heavy cream, not whipping cream, just heavy cream. You want to get 5 gourmet grasshoppers. The best bet is get them from Fluker's gourmet canned grasshoppers. Nothing better. And then 1 cup of ice. That's all you need for your ingredients. Now let's move on to your instructions. Again, it's real quick, so pay attention. First, you want to carefully position 2 grasshoppers on the counter in front of you to act as friends or observers, you know, just to keep you company. It helps when making this recipe. Then you combine the creme de menthe, the creme de cacao, the cream, and the ice in a cocktail shaker. And you cover and shake it up until it's chilled, because the ice does that. If you didn't have the ice in there, it won't get chilled. So make sure the ice is in there. Then you would strain that into a chilled cocktail glass, then garnish it with 3 of the Fluker's gourmet canned grasshoppers. You put them around the rim inside on top of the drink, and there you have it. This is the best grasshopper drink you could possibly get. This is Waspy Soda Pop with Food is for Eating. I'll see you next time.
Fluker's? Is that real? There's really a place that has canned grasshoppers, or
Yes. Actually, that's a real product.
It is. Actually, they used to have a section in Bullock's, which was a department store where they had a gourmet products, and they had chocolate-covered grasshoppers, ants, bee larvae. so this was back in the 60s. But we bought it. Yeah, we were just teenagers. We had it in the car, and we'd go, "Hey, you want some chocolate?" And whoever was in the back seat, they'd reach over, and they started eating, and we started snickering, and they go, "Well, wait a minute, what is this? What is this stuff?" And so I go, "What color was the wrapper?" And he goes, "Blue." Blue. Yeah, you just ate a grasshopper leg.
Yeah, in this case, the grasshoppers are actually meant for reptiles, is what that particular company sells them for. The weird thing is that there's normally a music bed there, and for some reason, during the rendering process, the music was gone, and I listened to it beforehand. I'm like, why is there no music? So I'm very sad. It's not a highly professional product as normal.
Waspy Soda Pop usually doesn't have real things in it, so that's why I was amazed that
you could actually have the grasshoppers in your grasshopper.
I could call up Fluker's and get some grasshoppers delivered. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you should.
I might. I just might.
Now we do have to go on to our next segment really quick. So this is hopefully, Brendan, if you have the emails from our listeners for Greg's legal question for the day.
He has an opinion, may not always be right. He's a real fake lawyer. He's old and he's white. Ask him a question, 'cause he's a good egg for bogus advice. Ask Greg. Ask Greg. Ask Greg.
Hey, Stanley, if you have to go to the bathroom right now, now's the time. These never go well. He's here.
All right.
So in that case, I'll hang around.
Brendan will get a legal question from our audience to ask Greg. Greg is not a lawyer, and so we do not recommend any advice that he gives, but this is the Ask Greg segment of the show.
Drunk law.
That's right. So much to choose from. I always try to pick something that, will apply to a lot of people, not be too specific. Let's see. Here's one. Dear Greg, I'm writing to you from my home here in South Missouri. I need to divorce my pet Rock. Now, my pet Rock and I have been together for a while, but he's just not cutting it anymore. So my question for you is this: as it is a rock and therefore an inanimate object, and I entered into this willingly against the state of Missouri's better sense, do I owe any sort of alimony to the Rock, having been married to the Rock now for over 10 years, in terms of Missouri? Or should I just stay married to the Rock and just put up with it? Dear, sincerely, Gladys.
Gladys. Apparently is her last name.
As if there's anyone named Gladys left in the world. Yeah. The dead name. But it depends on the pet Rock's behavior. Did the pet Rock cheat on Gladys?
She sent some pictures that are kind of a little racy, but she doesn't explain what they mean.
The pet Rock with other women, or
it's a lot of rocks. Like, you ever see those Zen stacked rocks thing? Is that a rock?
I'm just wondering if the relationship was ever consummated. That was my question.
That's also it was an inanimate object. That was kind of like my first wife.
Well, that is a reason for divorce. Withholding of affection. Right. If the pet Rock never put out, you're allowed to say, "Hey, she withheld affection. There was no, whatever." Right. They get that. So it depends on the pet. I need to know more about this. If this pet Rock did something egregious in this relationship, yeah, she could get alimony.
Okay. What questions would you like to ask? Dear Gladys,
were the children pebbles?
The children, yes.
Are there any children involved? Yeah. Okay. Was the relationship consummated? Did you consummate the relationship with the Rock at any point?
Yeah, we don't really have a lot of two-way conversation with these questions, Greg. Remember, we basically only have what we're given.
I know, but I'm saying it's important. It's pertinent to the issue. She could get alimony if we knew these things. As far as we know, if the pet Rock was a fine husband, was upstanding, it might be a little hard. It's just like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a pet Rock.
What would you recommend as proper alimony to give to a pet Rock, Greg? What would be the form of currency?
Well, is there a
Gladys wanted the alimony, right? Gladys wants the alimony from the pet Rock.
No, she was the working part. The Rock had no job because it's a rock,
It's a pet Rock.
So she supports the Rock. The Rock is now she's moving the Rock out, maybe into the front yard. I don't know. Does she owe anything to the Rock? That's really the inherent bottom line of the question.
I think the fact that the pet Rock wasn't upholding his duties as a husband, sexually, emotionally, that I think a judge would say that no alimony is necessary because he was basically, this pet Rock was sponging off of her for however long they were married.
I need to know this judge because I think there's a lot of guys out there that want this judge for sure.
Well, a good friend of Greg's, this particular judge, is what I think.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, good. I will send it off. Boop. There we go.
Thank you, Greg, once again for your useless information.
And thank you for another totally fake legal question. That's never happened in the history of jurisprudence.
Sounds like that Rock might want to look into a special master.
I think there's attorneys that specialize in rocks, so perhaps the Rock will find his.
I think Greg is a special master.
My legal expertise was in mood rings, so pet rocks. I'm a little lava lamps, mood rings. That was my thing.
That's your specialty? Yeah, all right, well, let's get to our client for this. So once again, we've hardly given our client any attention. Our client for today was Geeks, Nerds, and Dweebs, but that was also to get further into a discussion involving putzes, schmucks, dorks. sure, schmeckles, whatever else you want to call it, and what those differences are, and like how those things came about. Now, one of the things I realized that is a common factor between a number of those words is that in Yiddish they mean penis, like putz, schmuck. Dork is another like term for
I think
penis.
schmendrick means taint, though. That's the taint in between the penis.
Not really sure about that,
This
but
just
I think it's interesting that, well, considering the nature of our client, we can expect things to have gone downhill. And Stanley, if you want to join in on this again, this is totally your choice. You can certainly give your opinion or run for the hills, because God knows where this is going to be heading. But
I would like to say, Stanley, if you do want to leave, but before you go, though, I'm curious. What do you see yourself on the spectrum? Would you say you're a nerd? Would you say you're a geek, or just not any of them?
I'm kind of geeky about things. Yeah, you know, computers, camera equipment.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure we were talking about a spectrum here, though, Greg.
Well, it's kind of like you're right.
Like the Putz Spectrum, which is like
Putzes are totally different than geeks or nerds. They're just like assholes, basically. A Putz is like you're a loser.
All right, well, I'm going to go through some basic definitions so we can get kind of on the same page, right?
Good, because I felt like that's what this was lacking.
This is always your favorite part when I do this, right, Brent? Is like, what is it? So a geek definition is an unfashionable or a socially inept person, whereas before it used to be a performer at a carnival or a circus whose show consisted of bizarre or grotesque acts, you know,
that's
who bit off chicken heads.
Biting the heads off chickens. Now, a nerd is a foolish or contemptible person who lacks social skills or is boringly studious. So I think there's the differentiation with that.
Like Ernie.
Is kind of the same. A dweeb is a boring, studious, or socially inept person. A putz is a stupid or worthless person, or somebody who engages in inconsequential or unproductive activity. A schmuck is a foolish or contemptible person. A dork, well, that's just basically a slang term for a penis, but it's also alternative form of dick, is that word. And apparently that started off as a nickname for Richard, meaning fellow, but by the late 1800s it had taken on an additional meaning of penis, which, you know, we should probably dig into that a little bit further. So anyway.
So wait, time out. You're promoting that we should dig into this penis?
Only if you're a doctor.
Okay, good. Glad we've got
any digging into any penises. But it's interesting that the word penis is used in so many different ways to call somebody a name. Like, why did somebody choose that as the word to use to insult somebody? Whereas
most guys are happy with their penis, proud of their penises. Like,
yeah.
You know.
But why does it become an insult then? That why is calling somebody a penis is an insult? Why is
interesting question?
So, but what's the story behind it, though? Do you think
it kind of goes back to that if you're not a masculine or tough guy, that you're going to get called a pussy, and I can't think of anything that's more resilient than one of those things. So I mean that doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah, those do get a lot of abuse, and usually from penises that they get a lot of abuse from. So, but I guess going back through the centuries, then there was do you think when they were cutting them off and throwing them at people that possibly that was a thing? I don't know that was a thing.
I do think all the definitions you had were like they've changed. Like geek now is like you could be, that sounds like a total loser what you described. Geeks now are like Bill Gates, multi-billionaires. They're like geeks have taken over the world, and nerds even like guys like the guys who do the MCU movies. They were nerds who like read comic books as kids, and now they're billionaires.
Well, I think if you're going to be in the movie business, like if you're a director or a producer, you kind of have to be a bit of a nerd, because you have to get into the minutia of creating a scene or creating a project. You need to get those details down. I don't know, Stanley, what would you say? I mean, you're the expert in this particular arena in terms of filmmaking.
I think
nerds.
The definitions have changed over time. I mean, guys like Bill Gates or he wasn't really, I think, a nerd, but Steve Jobs, have made that respectable. Calling somebody that, it's like calling
it's cool now. You're a
you're not cool. Yeah, well, I'm cool because I got $1 billion and you don't.
Exactly.
So you can call me whatever you want to call me.
I don't give a shit what you call me.
Yeah.
So to me, the question, I mean, you get into putz and schmutz and schmegel or whatever you were saying.
Putz?
Yeah. But really, what is the crucial difference between a geek and a nerd? Those terms get used somewhat interchangeably, but we all know they kind of mean different things. I think when we were all younger, nerd was more the word that was used. Now there's geeks, and geeks are different than nerds?
I think geeks are more specialized. Perhaps.
They're smarter, I think. Geeks are smarter.
They're like smarter than nerds. They have more specialized information than nerds have.
Nerds have specialized information that's not profitable, like a comic nerd or, he's a D&D nerd. But a geek is like someone like Bill Gates, who's like, I'm a total geek for computers.
I think a geeks is being sort of technically savvy,
Yeah.
Where a nerd is just, he's just into whatever he's into. But
like
these guys are specific. Yeah. Well, me too, I guess, to a certain degree.
Like my knowledge of comic books is off the fucking hook. But what does that get me? I'm a dishwasher.
Well, if you have Superman #1, it gets you $1 million.
Right.
Well, yeah, if I had that, yeah.
If you were more geeky in other aspects of it. So I think that's a good point, is that a nerd is a more generalist, and certainly tends to be like, you could be a nerd for, I have a friend, like as an example, I have a friend, I know not many, just a few, but he was really into backpacks for a while. Like, oh my God, this guy could talk for hours about different types of backpacks and this backpack and that backpack and comparing backpacks.
I've never heard of that, nerd.
I know.
Or geek.
Well, you don't run with computer programmers. So is he a geek, or is he a geek about backpacks, or is he just a nerd and backpack is his kind of focus area at this point? Because next week it'll be pocket watches or.
Well, I guess the question is, does he make backpacks?
No.
Then he's a nerd.
Yeah.
He's a nerd?
Yeah. If he made $1 million from making an amazing backpack and selling it, he'd be a geek.
Well, if he knew how to fix backpacks, he could still be a geek.
Yeah,
he wouldn't have to make $1 million from it to be a geek. Because there's those guys who are like, geeks are us, people who fix computers and things. They're not necessarily making millions of dollars. But I guess where I'm curious is, how is it we got from biting the heads off of chickens to somebody who's technically proficient at a topic?
Good question.
Like, how did that
That's a freak, not a geek. That's a freak, not a geek.
Right, which was why I was going, well, maybe the specialist thing is where this kind of settles out, because a geek, like a circus geek, well, I guess they were usually just one kind of performer in the circus. They were the ones that did the really weird stuff. They weren't, the bearded lady was a geek or just a freak. But the geek was the one that had like tattoos all over his face and ate chickens live on stage or whatever. That was...
And they were usually pathetic alcoholics. That's how they got into it. They were
they wouldn't
even get paid.
People.
They just give them a bottle of bourbon and be like, "This is your job, and we'll pay you in bottles of booze." They were like, it was sad. Being a geek.
Time out. The guys that did renovations on my house like about 6 months ago, that was how I paid them. So they were geeks, and I didn't know it.
Wait, now, Brendan, you used to live near like the freak town in Florida, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've been there.
Right. So when you were there, how would you have described the different people who were living in that particular town?
Well, you really had to. Yeah, this is kind of, I come from some background knowledge. There were the freaks. The freaks were they were all freaks. That was sort of the broad.
And what made them freaks?
Term.
Well, like little people, bearded ladies.
The claw hand people, the people with no legs, all that kind of stuff. And then
flipper babies.
Within the freak community, there were geeks. Geeks specifically did not have some sort of physical, and there went Stanley.
He just took the video off. He's still here.
No, it's okay. I wouldn't blame him. The freaks were like the ones that had some sort of physical disability. The geeks were the ones that didn't, but did something weird, like eat light bulbs or sword swallow or whatever. Those were the geeks, whereas the freaks were the ones that actually had some sort of deformity, basically. That was how it was explained to me by this guy in a red wagon with no legs. So
he had no legs, or the wagon had no legs?
The wagon never had legs. It had wheels, all four, but he had no legs. And he was
wagons don't have legs, Matt.
So
wagons have wheels.
Anyway.
Because if wagons have legs, they're called a table.
Or Baba Yaga.
No, that's a Russian witch, but that's not the same thing. But I think where we can see modern day geeks coming from the guys who cut the heads off of chickens.
No, I don't.
Heads off
Those
chickens.
guys were morons. Those guys were like alcoholic. Just...
No, I'm saying, but I'm in terms of where the word changed, how it changed, is because, as Brendan was saying, the geeks at the circus had a specific task that only they were able to do, or only they were willing to do. And
Matt,
that
anyone could have bit the head off a chicken. You just had to be desperate enough to.
Not anyone would have bitten the head off a chicken, Greg.
Yeah, if you had descended enough in your life where you were drunk and you were just so pathetic that, hey, if I get a bottle of booze every day, I'm happy. I'll do anything. I don't know if it's a skill set.
I'm saying at the time that was somebody, only a particular person. Stanley, if you're trying to say something, you're muted right now. We
need Stanley's opinion on this.
Because
I know.
He would know, like, who on My Three Sons? Which one of the people on My Three Sons was the geek or the nerd?
I think our guest counsel has a lot to, just from the lifestyle that he lived.
I think Ernie would have been known as the nerd or the geek on our show, primarily because he just had the quintessential look of a nerd or a geek back then, which was a guy with glasses that looked brainy.
Right.
I don't think it had any weird connotation to it. It was like a euphemism for being an overly smart guy or a genius or something.
What about Richard Nixon, though? Richard Nixon, what would you classify him as? Was he nerdy? Geeky?
No, not really nerdy. I mean, he was more, homespun than I would have thought. If he hadn't had the...
He was a Quaker.
To commit crimes. It was sort of like Andy Griffith or something. A weird looking guy that, God, you just don't know how people are really going to be. I mean, certain people commit crimes and didn't even need to. There was no way he was not going to be reelected then.
Did you ever get to talk to Richard Nixon after this whole shakedown of Watergate?
No,
years later?
There came a point where, I just decided, you know what, I'm better off out of here. But I didn't know where it was going. And when I was doing some of that high school stuff, the Watergate thing had already broken. And I had to go back to them and go, hey, look, I'm going out and I'm talking about this, but they want to talk about that. What do I say?
I think they should have taken Nixon and have him replace Fred McMurray on the show, and it would have been a completely different.
You know what? He would have been pretty good. Oh, boys, I'm not a crook.
You're gonna play piano every episode.
Right.
G. Gordon Liddy plays Uncle Charlie.
He would have been great. I think he would have been better on Leave It to Beaver. His Ward and June could have been Pat Nixon.
That is a good one. I like that. Eddie Haskell is Howard Hunt.
Yeah. Or Earl Cummins or something. Yeah, it was pretty weird. I mean, you just look at the package and you go, I would have never expected that out of that guy.
I honestly, whatever. I don't think anyone probably starts off on that path and gets there. I think they start off one way and they end up there, and I think that's all that happened to him or any of these guys. It just they're like going this way and then they go this way.
That's the weird thing about politics to me is anybody can be it. You decide you want to run. You can be a guy that was cleaning out septic tanks. This morning going, I don't want to do that anymore. I could get myself elected and make $200,000 a year. I'm running. I don't want to sell shoes anymore. Because there's no qualifications for somebody running out. I mean, you don't need a legal degree. You don't need a degree in political science or.
Right. You could be like a cocktail waitress in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You could be Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, or Ronald Reagan.
Media darling. I mean,
Well, Ronald Reagan. No, I want to give Ronald Reagan some credit. I never voted for the guy, but he did run SAG before he ran for governor.
That's true.
Which is a political position,
Yes, it is.
And so he did have a little bit of practice dealing with people.
I didn't want to say Trump because we talked about him a lot. Donald Trump.
You talk about him a lot.
Well, we've done full episodes regarding Trump and his insanity.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, he's still out there. That's the amazing part. I'm waiting for that.
He's still out there, just like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's still just like
Sasquatch. Sasquatch is still out there.
Yes. I think it's Trump's later career is he'll be roaming the woods of British Columbia is what he'll be.
Become a Yeti.
No, leave him in Florida. He could be the the skunk ape or whatever the monster is down there. Don't bring me
The
that.
Thin Man.
I left Florida because his people are sort of settling. They've always been sort of settling there, but now they're really kind of building.
He's gonna be like the orange boogeyman out in Boggy Creek or something.
Watch him run for governor.
Oh God.
Mark
Yeah,
my
the
words.
Boggy Creek films.
Nah, he would never run for
course.
governor. He was president. He would never lower himself to being governor or something else.
He
Yeah,
might
That's
run for,
that's
like,
off brand for Trump.
as a senator, because you could become Speaker of the House and have a lot of power, as you can see with Mitch McConnell. He's
Yeah,
but he
basically
wouldn't want to be speaker
derailed
either.
everything for the past 5 years. Are you kidding? You couldn't stop him from speaking.
Yeah. Stanley, I'm curious, as an ex-Republican, what do you think about the Republican Party now?
Oh, I'm not a Republican now.
I know, but what do you think about them? Are you disgusted? Are you
Disgusted. Yeah, it's not even a political party. I mean, I think they had some validity, although I didn't agree with any of their policies or whatever. But yeah, now it's just like it's a freak show is basically what it is. I mean, somehow they've been taken over by the freaks and geeks and
That's a good
weirdos
idea.
and-
So let's start naming off. So Mitch McConnell, freak, geek, putz, dork,
Putz.
schlub.
No, dork.
I would say
McConnell's a dork.
traitor because I'm
Turtle
radical
dork.
here.
Yeah,
I would say
whatever.
Well, but
traitor to America.
McConnell wasn't like behind the insurrection or anything that, and actually spoke out against it. And his wife walked away
No,
from the
I'm
cabinet
not saying
seat
in
as
that
well.
instance, but everything
Yeah.
he fights for is like against the principles of America. Like, oh, the president gets to declare the new Supreme Court justice. No, Merrick Garland. Sorry, he just makes it up. He just says,
Yeah,
no,
he just makes it up and gets everybody
Barack
to
Obama
say,
can't
okay.
beat Merrick Garland, and we lost to Supreme Court justice.
Okay, well, we're not
Yeah,
going to get into the
but
debates
then-
of the
then
merits of Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, here we get to the real point. Greg. Here we get to the real point is once you get to that point, Greg, and you are the one that can exercise your will, whatever that may be, would you? And wouldn't that make you a traitor to the people that think what you think is a bad idea? I mean, aren't we really just talking about
No, I wouldn't
who's
do
in
that.
power gets to wield it?
I would follow the rules because I like the Constitution. I would follow the
Well,
rules.
he is
that
following
down.
He is following the rules.
Any
that are laid out
sitting
in front of him.
president can elect a Supreme Court justice. It's always been the rule. But
But somehow,
it
the
was
Senate
Obama's
can also,
last
but the
year.
Senate can. Oh God, we're going to get to
It was
see that.
Obama's
The Senate
last
can
year.
also. The Senate can
But
also stop it. That's the point you don't
Oh,
understand.
No,
See,
but
I
Merrick
think
Garland was a
that-
pretty good guy. It wasn't like there was no reason to. He was a perfectly fine candidate.
I think what we've learned out of all of this is there are no rules. There were just norms, and we all thought they were rules.
I know.
So what they need to do is they need to come up with rules so they're hard and fast, and you can't bend them. Because then you're just relying on the integrity of the person in office. And as far as I can see, I don't think Republicans have any integrity. It's just-
So then who creates
not in
rules?
their
Is
DNA.
it geeks, nerds, dweebs?
the people in power
I'm trying to
will
like
have
keep
the
our
power.
client
Well, hopefully
intact
none of the
somewhat.
above, Matt. Just like
I think
sensible.
it's- using this, I think the nerds create, having worked in Washington, we both have. I
Yeah.
think the nerds create the laws. I think the geeks are the ones in front of the cameras.
Yeah,
Those
who are the
specialists.
schmucks though? Which ones are the schmucks?
Any of the press secretaries, regardless of political party, all the liars, all of
The
them.
messenger. They're not making anything up. It's just, here it is. Whatever you want me to say, I'll say it.
Yeah, I can't think of a single press secretary that's been worth anything.
I still feel so bad for that one guy. Who was Trump's first press secretary? That chubby.
Oh, you talking about Sean
Oh.
Spicer?
Sean Spicer?
Thank you. Oh my God. I felt bad for that guy, even though I hated him. I was like, wow, you're doing the devil's work. But it was like, he just seems so put upon and like
They all
so
are.
out of his league. He
They
just
all are.
seems
I
so
think
sad.
Sean just wore it badly. Like you could see it on his face.
Yes.
He wasn't
Because
good
he
at-
knows he's lying. He knows
Right.
It's like when
I
they were
know.
showing the crowd in front of the Capitol on when
Yeah.
he was giving his speech, and he had to go around and say that it was the largest crowd. Period. And it's like you're looking at the picture going, that
Yeah.
crowd's not very large. What is he talking about?
No,
But I gotta
no.
say, I almost felt sorry for him after a while. I was just like, oh, this poor guy. He's
I-
fucked.
I
Well,
totally-
you sold your soul to the devil to have that
Yeah.
position. That's all it is. Look at Kellyanne Conway. I mean,
Oh, I
if you
don't think
like the
Kellyanne
facts,
Conway
doesn't
had
matter.
a soul to sell.
Yeah.
She is a geek. That one is a geek. She's
Kellyanne?
not a nerd. Oh yeah.
Oh.
Her husband is a nerd. She's a geek.
What about Ann Coulter?
Geek.
Awful.
Yeah, geek. She'd bite a head off a chicken.
She's not smart enough to be a geek.
She would be like the circus sideshow geek. She's not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we're getting closer and closer to chicken biting, and
she'll bite the head off a liberal in a second.
They'd have her on that wheel where they throw the knives at her. They spin that wheel. Oops, miss. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Kelly.
Welcome to another edition of Spot the Republican. All right,
What
so
does Doofus fit in here? Is Doofus
could be part of it as well. You know, I think it's all
That's
comes
just
down
the
to
W, right?
stupid people. You know, back in the days, the early days of My Three Sons, before terms like nerds and geeks, what were the words that people used to describe somebody other than, I guess, stupid or idiot?
I.e.
or moron?
Ernie. No, Ernie
just
was
a
smart.
basic idiot or you're dumb. I mean,
Yeah.
we had other words to describe things other than people, like cool or
Yeah.
clunky. Clunky.
Well,
was
I
a
know
big
that
all
one of
time.
the key words in My Three Sons was the word neat. Like things were neat.
Yeah, neat,
What?
cool, clunky.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, those were words that we used a lot. Not necessarily
Clunky, though.
to describe people. Clunky was the big one.
Huh.
That's the one I always get reminded me of. Yeah, I don't want to go with that clunky girl. You know,
Ooh.
I never heard that word.
I want to bring clunky back.
I talk about clunky.
I
I
like
talk
it
about
too.
clunky all the time, but I talk about clunky design. Like somebody will design a web page or a software or something. I'm like, yeah, but it's clunky. So I use clunky. I never thought about clunky person, but I could totally see a clunky person.
I think that basically three of us on this picture are clunky, to be honest.
Now, Stanley, would you say a clunky girl could be just
I'm
a homely
working
girl
on clunky.
who's kind of nice?
I would
use it
say
to be like,
the
oh, that
description of
girl's
a clunky girl was she wasn't too appetizing or appealing.
okay.
You know?
That's what I was asking.
It's like her
yeah,
looks weren't working well together.
Yeah.
The whole package. didn't
Yeah, the
come
package
together.
just that's what it means. I mean, from a design perspective, that's what it means. It's just off. It's not like repulsive, but it's just off. It's just clunky. It just doesn't fit.
Right.
Her eyes were
Something
too
wrong.
big.
It's
her
like missing
feet
an
were too
ankle
big.
bone.
She's got a small head.
Right.
Something.
Right.
You know?
Small
Yeah.
head. Like a really tiny head.
She's a
Big neck.
macrocephalic. She's big head.
That's
We never had
exactly-
any of those on My Three Sons.
I'm sure
Everybody
they
was
didn't make it
perfect.
past the
It was
casting couch.
My Three Sons with just pinheads playing everybody's part.
Yeah.
It'd be good to go.
The Freaks episode where you went to the freak show and Chip fell in love with the pinhead girl.
Yeah. Or the
Oh.
snake
Brought him
woman.
home.
I want that episode.
And maybe that's why you never saw pictures of the widow. I mean, of the widower. Of
You do see a
Maury's
picture of her.
wife.
I
you do? Oh.
never knew that. There's actually an episode where on Steve's desk you see the woman who was his wife, and I never realized that. I wasn't in that scene, but yeah, he refers to her, as his wife, and there's a picture over there. And she wasn't what I thought she would be. You know, I was like, oh, kind of a Betty Crocker looking kind of lady. You know.
Did you think she was going to be more
Barbara
exotic?
Stanwyck?
Oh.
A little more exotic.
The
Maybe
little
Joan
baby.
Collins or something. Joan Collins. I would picture him with like Doris Day. It seemed like they would be
Yeah.
a perfect couple to be in My Three Sons.
Like a father does best type couple.
Yeah. But Doris Day is, she was pretty cool for back then. Women loved her, guys loved her. I loved her. I did a movie with her, so that's the reason I like her. I did Please Don't Eat the Daisies with her. She was pretty cool.
When
Seems
did
like she was
they?
good looking.
When did they have to stop people from actually eating daisies, though?
That's a good question. I don't know. I did a publicity picture with like a handful of daisies in my mouth. I don't know what that was supposed to mean.
I'm sure the insurance guys gave you shit about it. Like, you can't eat daisies anymore.
Hey, look, if they could
No
replace
surfing,
my brother for glasses, they
No
could
baseball,
replace me
no
for
eating daisies.
I was at my nephew's farm, and they were constantly, they're all vegans. They were feeding me flowers. They cooked sunflowers on the grill. It was actually pretty good. But yeah, they had a lot of flowers. So somebody needs to talk to the hippies. They're still doing it.
Did they put spices on the flowers? There's like
Well,
cumin.
sometimes the little girls, my little nieces, I guess, whatever they are. The little kids that are the children of my brother's son, my nephew, they would just bring me flowers like, look, eat this one. You can eat this. I'm like, I hope this is true.
I hope no dog peed on this.
At least roughage.
I didn't start hallucinating, and I made it to Wednesday, so I guess I'm okay.
Well, we could certainly like utilize all of Stanley's free time today, but I'm sure he has much more important things to do.
I'm getting a warning here too. I just disappeared. It came up and said your battery's about fried. So
I want to thank you very, very much, Stanley, for coming on the show. This is Stanley Livingston,
I had a blast.
known for My Three Sons and many, many things that he did in his life after My Three Sons as well. But go to his website, www.stanleylivingston.com, and also look at his artwork. He's actually got some really good stuff at stanleylivingstonart.com. Is there anything coming up that you want to promote really quick, Stanley, in any way?
No, I do have another project that is coming up. It's called The Actor's Journey. It's actually already made, and we had it up, but I had to take it down, because of COVID. But I also moved not too long ago, and I couldn't deal with it. But we made a project actually for actors, but it has nothing to do with acting. It has to do with the business side of being an actor. And it's a 10-hour-long program on the business of being an actor. And I brought together 100 people from the industry, directors, producers, agents, managers, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, the president of the DGA, and they teach this program on what you're supposed to be doing when you're not acting, which is pretty much 98% of your time. And that's something that's not taught at, acting schools or universities or colleges. But 45 of the people that we brought in for this project have either won or been nominated for Academy, Emmy, Gold Globe Awards. And they've been almost to a person in the industry, 25, 30 years. So you're getting this information from the horse's mouth. And
so the actor's journey, that's
it's called The Actor's Journey.
You're preparing that for streaming, right?
We're preparing it for streaming. Yeah, right. It used to be a DVD product, and it's going to come back up again in probably about 30 to 60 days. Right now, if you go to YouTube and type in The Actor's Journey, you can watch some clips, and you can see a lot of the people who are involved in it. You're going to know the actors more than the directors, but there was some big directors involved. Richard Donner, the guy that did all the Lethal Weapon movies, The Omen, what else? Superman. Yeah, so we had some really huge people that really wanted to jump on board because this information just isn't out there. And, these people spend anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 learning the art and craft of acting, and then it all comes to a screeching halt because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing to launch a career and sustain it and try and keep it going. But this kind of resolves all those problems.
Wow, that sounds great. That's probably something that should be taught at schools, I would think.
Right.
Yeah, maybe at some point. Yeah, it's at the colleges or universities. Yeah, I designed it so it could be taught as a 10-week course. It's actually an 8-volume, 10-hour-long program. So I figure if it ends up in either an extension school that goes about 10 weeks, it's perfect for that.
I'm just curious, as a poor guy, being on My Three Sons and it's still being shown, you could live off that forever. Are you getting good royalties?
No, we don't get good royalties off.
Oh, no.
But, the side benefit of being on it, it's, opened a lot of doors and kept a lot of other things going.
Yeah.
So that's the thing you want. I mean, when I did it, I never knew it was going to run 12 years to begin with. And then, most shows have their shelf life, which is usually maybe a couple more years after the show is off. Our show has literally continuously been on the air since 1960.
But you don't profit from that?
Not directly. Sometimes I do, though. Sometimes we'll still get residuals for certain things. But, for the stuff that was on cable, we didn't. Unfortunately, our union didn't negotiate a great contract for us. But,
he makes huge money being on podcasts like ours, Greg.
No, not that.
I'm going to retire right after the show.
This is it. This was the big one.
This is what his culmination of his career is stuck with us.
Hang my hat on this one.
No, please don't. Don't hang any hats. Don't hang any pictures. Nothing.
Don't talk about hanging even.
Or maybe don't mention you were on the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't do that a lot. You don't get to know. I'm always surprised when people find out after they've known me for a year and then they're like, wait a minute, I just found out who you were. You know, and I'm like, oh, really? Who am I? I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Good question.
Well, thank you again. That's
Anyway,
Stanley
guys,
Livingston for My Three Sons, and like I said, many
Thanks,
other
guys.
things.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank
And he's
you.
helped us out with our client, which is Geeks, Dweebs, and Dorks, or something like that. I don't remember.
Now,
anymore.
figure that one out. Let me know.
You definitely get a Quibbly next year.
Yes, we have an award show every year, so you're getting a Quibbly. So we'll reach back out to you for the award show. It'll be in June.
All right, guys. All right. Well, have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you again.
Good night.
Your consultation with the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker has ended. You may pay your retainer at www.qsblaw.org. Please exit to the right of the water cooler and grab a candy from the front desk. We hope to see you again soon, but you need to leave now. I said leave. Why don't they ever listen? Get out! Get out!